funds. But when living there were some harrowing stories, you know, nice, well-to-do people who had just sold their house. The transfer was, you know, just being completed. The money landed in the bank, and suddenly, you know, let's just put a number on it. They sold their house for, you know, 300,000, and suddenly 200,000 of that is just gone.
All right. Hello, this is Jim Forsythe with Citizens for Sound Money, and here with Marian Ward, our executive director, and we're pleased to have Ed Stanley from Bullion Capital / Kinesis here with us today. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Jim.
So I have to disclose up front, besides chair of Citizens for Sound Money, I'm also a partner amongst multiple partners in Silverback Precious Metals. And that's how I got to know you, is because you're handling distribution for Kinesis, and Silverback took an interest in that and wanting to help out. So that's where I met you. And when you told me your background and story, I immediately said, we got to get this guy on for an interview. So tell us how you kind of came to Kinesis.
All right, I'll give you a little bit of fill-in on my personal history that got me to that kind of point. So I'm Irish originally, but my parents retired out in Cyprus because the weatherman and the taxman is quite favorable out there. And after traveling around the globe and my father passing away, my mother had a bad health. So I traveled back to Cyprus and decided to set up my residence there, and got involved in some business at the time, doing import and kind of distribution period until we had we went through the global financial crisis, and then we finally had the Cyprus Bail-In, where we had to discontinue our business. And it was that bail-in caused me to start thinking and understanding and looking about the interest in gold. You know, I saw some huge cracks in the financial system, and gold drew me in. It just happened that after doing lots of kind of research and learning and understanding the gold market, I bumped into Tom, who at the time was running Bullion Capital over in Cyprus, and I saw the product, which was at that time, which was still used as Metal Desk, a system where anyone could go and purchase gold and silver and have it in a vault. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. We hit it off. We went out for a meal together.
You're talking about Tom Coughlin, right? CEO.
Yeah. We went out for a meal together. We had a discussion. I'd been in Australia. I'd actually worked for a very limited period of time as I backpack at the Kalgoorlie gold pits for a couple of weeks, just some extra bucks. But I'd been around Australia, so we got talking. Tom said, I'm interested in you to come and join the company. I sent him my CV, and I definitely wasn't the typical financially background person that fit into the company. And as Tom said, he decided to take the wild card. He actually, I think Tom actually called me to tell me that I didn't have a job with him. And by the end of the phone call, he was like, you know what, Ed, I'm hiring you. Like, let's just see where it goes. And that's, it's about 8 years now. So I initially came on and have worked, as you said, running Bullion Capital. And as Kinesis has grown, Tom felt it relevant for me to also take a role in Kinesis to deal with the head of physical and the distribution side of our physical products.
Now, when we talked, I think, wasn't it, in Cyprus, the computers were just crazy expensive, and you saw that as kind of an opportunity to bring lower cost computers in.
Yeah, I to admit, I was never an IT guy. Bless my mom. She always thinks that because I ran an IT company, I can come to your house and fix your computer. I was like, Mom, I pay people who know how to do that. We just saw the opportunity. Laptops were ridiculously overpriced on the island, and consumers couldn't really get into the market. The top end, you were looking at a top end laptop of we hadn't turned into the euro yet. We were still in the Cyprus pound, but you know, let's say $1,000, where most people's salaries were about $1,000 a month. So you know, it is just prohibitively expensive. So we started importing what are they called, refurbished laptops, and then giving them a warranty period, and we grew our business from there. Then we got into Apple and iPhone, and ended up being a distributing partner for mine remains about 15 major brands, including Apple, Griffin, and you know, a load of accessories. And that's kind of where I built up my experience of trade within Cyprus and also the whole Middle East.
Yeah, I think the point of that though is you know, you weren't some company taking advantage of people. You were somebody who came and built a company in order to get lower priced products into people's hands, right? And go through the details of that bail-in, because when you described that, I was kind of horrified.
So let's the whole obviously, because we sat as a distributor, you have a feeling in the market for the amount of liquidities there, and you could feel suddenly before the bail-in came, banks started squeezing. You know, you had credit terms, or you know, agreed credit terms that facilities that you could borrow from, and suddenly they were like, oh, we're just going to close those facilities if you're not using them. Okay, suddenly they started squeezing out of the, you know, most of the market was running on credit, and suddenly, you know, they started squeezing back on those limits from everywhere. What had kind of happened is two of the Cyprus biggest banks had two major issues sitting on their books. They had a whole load of non-performing loans, and they invested a huge amount of capital into Greek government bonds. Obviously, Greece had had a bail-in of itself, so they had lost humongous amounts of money on this Greek national debt. And Cyprus, it became aware that Cyprus needed a bail-in. So I think we needed about 17 billion euros at the time to be bailed in. And Troika and the IMF came up and said, all right, we'll cover you for 10, we'll loan you 10, but you need to deal with this 7, which is mainly in your banking system. So what our suggestion is we're going to bail in the depositors of the bank. So the two major banks, first of all, Laiki and Bank of Cyprus, all shareholders were instantly wiped out. Your shares were null and void, zero value, that equity was gone. The banks had been borrowing money off it's called the ELA, emergency lending, emergency liquidity assistance. That kind of propped them up at that particular point. But at that stage, you know, it wasn't going to go forward. So the first kind of push that they had is they had this idea to charge 6% haircut off everybody under 100,000 euro, and I think it was meant to be 10% over 100,000 euro of a haircut. That didn't throw through Parliament because the government kind of suddenly realized that they guaranteed and insured all the deposits under 100,000, you know, under 100,000 euros. So if they gave them a haircut, that was just going to come back onto the government.
Right.
So finally, they went to push through Parliament again. It was going to be a 9.9% haircut on everything over 100,000 euros. That didn't materialize. Actually, what happened is all the account holders in the Laiki Bank. So if you had over 100,000, it was just confiscated. It was gone. It was wiped out. It went. The bank collapsed in respect. So everybody who still had under 100,000, their accounts were moved across. They turned the Popular Bank into a bad bank. They were moved across into the Bank of Cyprus. Everyone in Bank of Cyprus with over 100,000 got was it 47.5% in shares in the bank, which immediately devalued. So it was quite a bit of a mess. But this whole thing, I mean, living through it was a totally different experience. You know, when you hear the numbers and a lot of billions, it doesn't give you a feeling how it felt to sit there on a day. So we have this, it's called Green Monday. It's the start of the Lent period, where they start fasting towards Lent in the Orthodox Church. So we have a long weekend. So on Monday, while the banks were already, you know, a bank holiday, they announced this haircut was coming. Obviously, that stopped anyone running to the bank. There was no bank run because the banks were closed on that day, except for going to the, your ATM and maybe withdrawing, a couple of $1,000s until you reach the limit on your card. The banks did not open for 10 days.
Wow.
All right. Now, what people didn't understand is they put on controls instantly. So until those banks opened, some people were waiting on payroll. ATMs were limited to 300 euros as a transaction. That didn't matter if you were a person or a company. It was 300 euros. So if you wanted to do payroll for, paying some of your staff, it wasn't possible. Just before that period, I actually withdrawn, I think it was like 5,000 or 6,000 euros and stuck them in my safe. And I was like, I'll just sit on some cash. Just felt, the market was feeling very edgy, and I was like, maybe it's good to have, a couple of months of, some money in the safe. And my friends were making fun of me. We're absolutely making fun of me. They're like, dude, someone's going to come to your house and you're going to get robbed. Why would you put, 6,000 euros in your safe? Those same friends, I would say about 2 weeks later, came back and they were like, Ed, could you lend me, 500 euros? And I was like, what are you going to do with it? It was like, oh, for payroll for my guys. I was like, did you have, 20 staff on your books? Surely you don't pay them that badly. He's like, no, just we need 50 euros here and there so they can buy bread and milk. Like everything just stopped. It was everything just came to a halt. And once it did start, it was amazing to see what happened in that period afterwards. Your normal the credit card POS terminals, suddenly when you ran your credit card, or you think the payments were going to Bulgaria or to Greece, or people were getting those from other countries to run their transactions because they just didn't want their money to go back into the Cypriot banks. The media side was even funnier because we had a big supermarket chain called Orphanides that had recently gone bankrupt, that was separated. But the English and the European, at least the European media had come, and they'd filmed inside these supermarkets where there was nothing on the shelves. And they were broadcasting that kind of around Europe. And I had family members in Holland and Ireland calling me up like, do you need us to send you food? And I was like, no, we have food on the shelves. We just don't have any cash to go and buy the food. I mean, you could still use your debit cards, go and purchase stuff, but do it. Again, you're still limited, and as in a business, everything came to a grinding halt. And we were just discussing this before. A lot of people say, oh well, the limit's 100,000 euros. So if it's only these kind of rich people that got affected. And there was a lot of media about being rich Russians and oligarchs having their money in Cypriot banks. So so what if they lose some funds? But we're living there were some harrowing stories, nice, well-to-do people who had just sold their house. The transfer was, just being completed. The money landed in the bank, and suddenly, let's just put a number on it. They sold their house for, 300,000, and suddenly 200,000 of that is just gone, taken, wiped out.
Well, and then there's people like you who had a business. So yeah, you were over 100,000, but you had payroll to meet, you had employees, and but you had debts and stuff.
And interestingly, they wiped out that on your credit side, but on the opposite side, your debts were still sitting there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had secured accounts where we were a trading company. We had a large credit line, and to do that, we had to put down a large deposit that was held. That deposit was cut, but it wasn't cut off our credit line. They didn't say, oh, okay, we're taking 400,000 off here, but we'll cut that off that credit line that we owe you so it balances up. Say, no, sorry. I mean, there's been cases continuing, and there was one finished in June where it got thrown out of court, the compensation case against the Bank of Cyprus. But I want to just read you this line that came out of the case, because I think it's just fantastic. So citing the law in Cyprus, the court ruled, from the moment monies are deposited within a bank, they cease to be an asset, property of the depositor, but rather become an asset of the bank. And they were trying to enforce that the crux of this case was that their property rights had not been taken into account during the bail-in. And they would say, well, you know, it wasn't your property. And I think that's the big lesson that needs to be learned. And I think all of us, or at least myself, have grown up in the West with this, I don't know, mindset that the bank is safe. You never see someone go and look at the financials of the bank that you deposit money with and go through their financial statement and say, is this creditor worth it? If you lend your buddy $500, you do a better evaluation. You know, you're like, oh, well, he's got a job and, you know, he's got a house and yeah, he can pay me back my $500. You don't think about that. You just walk up to a bank and you say, oh, it's a bank, you know, fine. And nobody thinks about the fact that, I mean, let's call a bank what it is. You're an unsecured creditor of that bank. You've given over your money and you're just a debtor to that bank. And I think once I'd been through this situation, I said, you know, where is my asset that doesn't have a counterparty risk? What is, you know, and I was like, okay, I could buy bonds. Oh, but, you know, bonds is a government debt. Oh, I could buy corporate bonds. Oh, pretty well every asset out there, I mean, except minus a piece of property, always had this counterparty risk. And I was like, well, where can you park a large amount of money that doesn't have a counterparty risk and is super liquid? And that brought me to, you know, understanding gold and silver. You know, property is a wonderful investment, but everybody knows, you know, it's not liquid. It's not that easy. I mean, in the US, it's a lot simpler. In Cyprus, selling a house, I'm in the process of selling a property. It has been 4 months just going back between two lawyers. Back and forward, back and forward. It's something that, you know, I hope in the future we get that digitalized and it's on a blockchain and, you know, you push one button and the funds and the things are, exchanged on an escrow system in seconds and you're done, because it's just painstakingly slow. So that's what led me to, you know, go down the yellow brick road of gold and silver. And obviously in the Cyprus market, there aren't bullion shops. There isn't a local coin dealer. There is now one on the island. But if you want to go and buy physical metal, your choice is to go to the jewelers, you know, and that's a really bad trade.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. It's a great trade if it's intergenerational wealth. If you're going to buy, you know, gold jewelry that you're going to hand down through your family for years, it makes sense. But as a quick trade, that just doesn't make sense. So I looked, you know, to Germany. There was a couple of, you know, big bullion dealers, but then comes the logistical challenge of moving that bullion. How do I get it to Cyprus? Oh, if it passes over the value of 10,000 euros, I have to do declarations. You know, how do those work? For the average citizen, that's not the simplest thing to work out. So when I saw, you know, what we were offering at Bullion Capital, I was like, wow, what a great system. No counterparty risk, storage, and I can, you know, diversify that wealth across the world. So I can put that in different hubs, which is part of the framework that ABX utilizes, which is part of the framework that Kinesis obviously also utilizes. That, you know, the gold and silver is set, but it's not just set in one location. We've got that across the world in multiple vaults, which again de-risks everything.
Yeah, just imagine if that bail-in had happened and Kinesis had been around then, and you'd been positioned with Kinesis, you know, with your business.
Yeah,
it's been like
happy days.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, and you can flee the country, go redeem your gold and silver in some other country if you need to, you know, if you want to take physical possession. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we normally ask why sound money is important, but telling that story is, I think, probably one of the best ways. You know, people worry about inflation. Inflation is just a part of it, and you hit the nail on the head. Is that money in the bank is not your asset. You know, you're hit with that counterparty risk. And in the U.S., you know, we have FDIC insurance, so you know, below a certain amount, in theory, you're going to get your money, and I think you will, because they can just print it, right? It's just, it might not be worth too much
Right.
when you get it.
Well, it had me thinking about like my local bank branch. You used to have, they would have vaults inside your local bank branch and keep money on hand or whatever. I think between the ATM and the physical building, I don't think they hold more than $10,000 cash at my local bank. Like, so if I went to withdraw, I mean, no matter what it was, I'd still be hitting a limit. Like you're talking about the ATM, that's the best you can do in one day. Or, I mean, I think we're a lot closer to this than we think here. We're very comfortable in the US and I think the Western system, but
even let's say Europe. I mean, Europeans are waking up a little bit when we see the parity between the dollar and the euro, going on. But we've all been great years that our currencies have been relatively stable. There's been a bit of movement. You know, looking across at our neighbors from Cyprus, Turkey, you know, as I was saying to Jim, in the last 10 years, it's gone from three Turkish lira to a euro. So 3 Turkish lira to a dollar, as we're at almost parity, to 17. Argentina, I can't even keep up. The last time when I visited there 4 years ago, as I said, it went from 10 to 14 to 1, and I was excited about my 40% discount on my expenses there. It's now at something like 130 Argentinian pesos to the euro. It's just unreal.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought a few years ago that you would have had dollar on par with euro at all.
And we're living in very interesting times, and I think people have to really take responsibility and consider for themselves, be their own central bank, have a plan B, put something on the side. A lot of people say, oh, it's just for people who wear tin hats, stacking up silver and having silver coins, and I'm like, I've seen how quickly in a day things change. Literally, at that weekend, we went on a weekend. We woke up, our banks were closed. You couldn't get access to capital. Suddenly, capital controls came in when the banks did open. So, as a business, every time I wanted to do a wire transfer, previously I just went online, entered my information, and sent the funds. Now I had to bring proofs. I had to wait 3 days until the central bank approved my wire transfer.
They took it all the way to the central bank for that?
It had to be approved. It depended. There were certain limits. So if it was under 10,000 euros, it was done on the domestic bank. But in the business that I was involved in, we were importing laptops. We typically did a trade. It's $300,000, $400,000 trade at one time. So you had to suddenly get approval from the central bank to wire your money out. There was questions about everything. Please, an invoice wasn't sufficient. You had to turn up to your bank manager and do a little dance. Here's the guy's business card. Do you want to call him on the phone? Here's his invoice. Could you just please pay my supplier so I can conduct business?
Yeah, and we saw a small hint of that last year with a certain payment provider. I don't know that I'll name names, but and the same thing is like, wait, the pattern has changed. We're not approving this transfer. Like we couldn't, people have paid for things. We couldn't get the money out. And it was like 3 or 4 weeks. Meanwhile, we were trying to take that money and put it into minting KVT, which was going to expire at that price. And so we were going to take, a big loss on that. Luckily, somebody loaned us the money, but, just that 3 weeks of like, it was a lesson that the money's not yours. Like, wait, that's our money. Can't we get it? Nope, can't get it. Not until you jump through these hoops that you've jumped through 3 times before already.
They're their own arbitrators. You can arbitrate it, but there's no third party. They are the arbitrators between you and them. So
if you want to laugh about the inefficiencies in cyber, when it came to, I know quite a bit about taking cash out of the bank because I had this interesting issue. I like to buy things on my credit card, but with cash. As in, I'll pre-fund my credit card and spend it because I get air miles, and I'm a collector of the air miles. So anytime I want to do a large transaction, I'll try to use that with my credit card. But when I transfer from one bank to the other, it takes 3 days. Now it's got a little bit better. It's done in a day because of EU regulations. But it used to take 3 days from one Cypriot bank to send it to the other Cypriot bank. So I was like, this is ridiculous. I can just walk into the bank, ask for a withdrawal of 5,000, 10,000 euros, walk around the corner and deposit it in the other bank. You know, why does it take 3 days electronically when I can do this physically in person in an afternoon? So I used to do that sometimes. I'd be like, okay, I'll just pop to the bank, you know, and I'm like, can I have 5,000 euros? And just watch the teller's face. Why do you need it? But it's my money. I have it in the account. I would like 5,000 in cash, please. Or are you buying a car? We can facilitate. I have to go and talk to my manager. Okay, go and talk to your manager. They would bring me to a room. They would ask me questions. Why do you want this 5,000, you know, euro? And I'm like, oh, I just want to, but we can transfer that electronically. I was like, I understand you can, but it takes you 3 days. Like, I want to make the purchase now. I want to buy flight tickets and they're on a great price. You know, I've been on Skyscanner. I just seen a great deal. I want to go and buy that. And I want to buy it with my credit card because I'm going to get that free insurance on there. Ooh, let's use that. And it takes 3 days. It's ridiculous the way that we're treated as citizens by our banks. And I have a feeling it's insane. Banks should be like the governments, scared of their citizens in the sense, or scared of their patrons. Like I feel every time I go to a bank, I have to perform for the bank manager. It should be the other way around. You know, we deposit our capital in the bank. That's our hard-earned money. The bank manager should be there to serve us. And growing up, I've never felt that way. You know, I've always felt that the bank was some straight big institution that had all these rules and regulations that I had to follow. And now as I've matured in my life, I realized the bank is just an entity, you know, as myself. They don't have any you know, special powers. They're just another entity as we are. You know? And I think that's one part of everybody's financial education that we don't get at school, is starting to understand, like, you know, how banks function. What are they doing with your money? I had the most hilarious situation recently. I was in the bank and they said, oh, we have this new program for people. They take $100 out of your account every month and they invest it in a fund. I said, okay, so that's great. What are you investing in? Oh, I don't know. It's very good. Said, okay, sure. Okay, maybe, you know, you're the teller at the counter. Maybe it hasn't got down to you, you know, exactly how this works. So they said, oh, we can get you the specialist from our bank who deals with that. I said, okay, that would be very interesting. So I came into her office and she said, oh yeah, we have this program. I said, that's wonderful. You know, you're going to take $100 and invest it. What are you investing it into? Oh, into a fund. I said, okay, what constitutes in that fund? Are you buying government bonds? Are you buying, you know, equities? I'd like to have some idea of, you know, what I'm exposed to. Are we going to emerging markets, or are we buying, you know, grade A government bonds from, you know, US treasuries or UK gilts or something like that? Oh, it just goes into a fund. I'm like, well, you know, and then she started asking me questions like, did you work in a bank before? Why do you know so much? And I was like, because I took the effort to become financially literate. You know, I realized when we went through the bail-in and through my business, I understood business, but, you know, I wasn't financially literate on the other side of, you know, banking and counterparty risk. And these things hadn't really, you know, been presented to me. But going through this life experience, suddenly I was like, okay, you know, now I understand why, you know, oh, the fall of Rome happened because, you know, they clipped their silver coins and people started to say this money is you know, worthless. And I have a feeling we're at that stage again in history, because, you know, when I grew up, nobody called it fiat currency. There was the pound sterling, there was the Irish, there was the euro. There was no discussion about fiat. You know, now with the dawn of cryptocurrency, we have everybody talking about, oh, well, digital currency and fiat currency. But people are starting to very slowly awake to the fact that, you know, the currencies fail, you know, and have done through time. And I love the one that people don't realize, a lot of people that are, and because, you know, I associate with a lot of English people, is the pound sterling. That a pound was a pound in weight of sterling silver, you know, and it was adopted and brought into their currency because their own papers were pushed out, you know. And when I look at what Kinesis and we're doing, I almost feel that we're in that place that people, you know, people will suddenly flick that switch and say, why am I holding this government currency, which they just, they print more and more constantly? Where is that, where is that tangible, something real, and going back to sound money, making that transition back?
It is amazing how money has been abstracted over the last century, because it started out as gold and silver, then paper certificates, then that link was severed within the US, then it was severed internationally, and like you said, pound sterling just became, and it's just been this kind of gradual process, but really starting with the central banks and government spending contributing to that. But yeah, your story actually reminds me of the South Park. It's like, we're going to take your $100, we're going to move it into this other fund, and it's gone.
It really is just it is a little crazy, and I find it super interesting. Going back to how the media portray things, how things were portrayed in the media over the Cyprus Bail-In was so untrue, and that was also a big flip in my in my mind. I was like, when you're the guy on the news in the crisis, and you see what the rest of the world is seeing, and you're like, this is not true. What you're sending out, and these images are totally incorrect. And it's I find it the same in financial media about gold. Anybody starts talking about gold, and that they turn off, oh, thank you for your view. And I was like, okay, so then why are our central banks around the world buying gold?
Right.
If it's such a useless, pet rock, why are everybody in the market purchasing it? We've seen central banks, and it's not just China building their huge position. Bulgaria, Ireland added tonnage to their. I think the Czech Republic are in the process of themselves buying precious metals. So why are smartest people sitting up in central banks going out and buying gold, but financial media still looks at gold as that pet rock?
Yeah, I mean, around the world, it's less treasures are being bought by foreign countries, and more gold is being bought, and follow the smart people here and kind of do the same.